everyone. Looking forward to the conversation today. As always, feel free, drop your questions into the comments section. I will be more than happy to monitor those, and I will be taking a look at those. All right. So in today's day and age, and Chris, I heard this saying from Alyssa Merwin at LinkedIn. So shout out to Alyssa. And she called this idea, she said it's called the great rationalization. I love that, which is this idea of like, how do I, in today's world, in 2023 and going for the foreseeable future, how we talk about the combination of, we've been having these crappy ROI calculators that nobody believed for a long time. So we're not talking about those necessarily. But again, this idea of selling value, this idea of talking about impact, I think for this year is going to be everything. That if your team does not know how to have a conversation and understand the basic economics impact for your customers and what's happening to them, and has value changed? It used to be about doing X, saving time. Now we're about driving more revenue through this new business unit. And I think that, that's a conversation I have quite a bit, where people, I think, sometimes just don't realize that, hey, we've got to pivot our messaging. And again, like what is value to an individual or company evolves, as the economy evolves. And so, Chris, I'm going to get actually, Chris, why don't you do a quick intro?
Sure.
Talk a little bit about yourself. You're VP of Global Solution Sales at Wind River. Maybe just talk a little bit about your experience and why value selling for you is such an important part of today's sales process and ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jake. So I'm Chris Lanier. I'm at Wind River now as the VP of Global Solution Sales. I spent 18 years of my career at Microsoft as they were going through, and not that this journey's ever completed, but as they were going through that journey of moving from kind of traditional discrete product sales into what, is now a pretty significant solution selling engine. And had the opportunity a little over a year ago to move to Wind River and help lead some of that transition and transformation at Wind River as well. There are a number of companies for sure that are in this move from, hey, we've been traditionally selling kind of a discrete product, maybe it was a dumb product and unconnected or whatever, into this place where, kind of to your point, Jake, there's a whole new category of revenue opportunities, monetization opportunities. Now that things are being connected, but the skill set of selling what the kind of the promise of that new capability is to a customer is a completely different skill set than selling bits and bytes and a widget that will fit into the box that they have. And so that is a passion of mine. It's again something that I got to have a lot of fun doing at Microsoft, especially in the Windows embedded space. And that's a very similar space, the embedded, highly secure, highly performant kind of space at Wind River. And so it's a big challenge.
You saw the impact and you're like, this is, and I agree, this is where it's at. That's our, when people ask us our methodology, we peg to value-based selling as well too. It's been interesting. I mean, it's not, I think that some of these have a lot of like intertwinedness. I don't know if that's an actual word, but I think you get the gist of it. But the concept of like talking about value, it's funny. I think I definitely have probably some reps of mine that I managed back in the day that probably have PTSD from me saying like, where's the value?
Yeah.
To bring the value, man. Shout out to Adam Fisher in particular, who I know, like, are we bringing the V? Like we would always talk about it. So, let's just start with this, Chris. Like if for people who maybe haven't heard of value selling, or they're like, yeah, I get it. Like value selling makes sense. Like, how would you define it? Like, what's your definition of it? How would you, like, if someone said, like, what are the core tenets? What would you lay out for them?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is, it's selling with, I mean, this sounds so trite, right? But it's selling with the customer's business initiatives and objectives in mind. So it's not me coming to say to the customer, hey, we've got a great product that will fill this particular need that I think you have. It's really engaging with the customer, uncovering what their business issues, business initiatives are, as well as kind of helping them understand where there's opportunity that they may not have seen it in the past. The great example here, especially in the IoT space, is the whole monetization of data, or capabilities on top of devices over time. The classic example is Tesla being able to charge money
Yeah.
on vehicles that are out in market for years and years, and there's examples like that pretty much on almost every connected device in the market in some capacity. So it's being able to tie to those actual value components, whether the revenue, whether they're cost savings, whether the things that are a bit more abstract, to your earlier point of is the definition articulation of value changing, things like your ability to maintain and retain talent, right? That is huge. And so the hard work of value selling really lies in becoming really good at uncovering what those value components are for your end user, your end customer, and then snapping your opportunity very articulately to those value points, and then driving it, and not getting distracted by technology, not getting distracted by feeds and speeds, not getting distracted by them asking questions around demos and proof of concepts, but always coming back to, if we can provide this type of value, what's it worth, basically.
Yep. And another thing I'll call out, there's a lot there, but it's value to the individual and the group or department. It's not always value like the broad company. And I think a lot of reps, they're like, well, I've got this great proposal, I've talked to a bunch of people, and here's how we're going to help the organization. And what I've seen, Chris, and you can kind of tell me what you've seen, is like, if I'm working a mid-market enterprise deal, my proposal has my value very specific to each group. Hey, IT, this is how we work with you. Operations, this is you. Marketing, this is you. And I think what I see is, the other 90% of proposals I see are like this kind of one size fits all. Here's how we're going to help your company. And so when I think about this, it's the value to the person or the department, and making sure you've nailed it. And there obviously could be, especially if it's depending on the company size, some broader company initiatives, but wow, you got to customize it.
I 100% agree.
As much as possible.
That's what, as we are kind of emerging at Wind River into a kind of let's call it a V2 of our value selling effort, that's exactly the approach we're taking. In fact, it is an individual value conversation, right? And of course, you would assume that those attribute up to some kind of overarching value conversation that is at the highest level. The CEO's value kind of construct should find its way to a mid-level manager, but by the time it gets all the way to that person, it would be very distracted or dispersed. And so understanding what that person really needs and what the value is to that person is huge.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That, like I say, people care about themselves first, themselves as employees second, and the company third.
That's great. Yeah.
And so just very simply, just always think about it. I think I did a LinkedIn post on this last week about prep for the person. I look at their LinkedIn. How do they talk? What do they think about? And if you're struggling with this, my friends, if you are ever struggling with what is value today to a job title, right? So let's take it to the next, piece here, outside of just looking at their LinkedIn, Chat GPT. I am telling you, sales teams, if you're like, Jake, I don't know, I just started this job 5 months ago, I don't know what a VP of operations in an industrial manufacturing cares about, type it into Chat GPT. Your mind is going to explode.
Wow.
And you can literally have, hey, look, a lot of VPs of ops I'm talking to in industrial manufacturing are thinking about this and this. Like, which of these is most top of mind for you? Oh, well, great question, Jake. But right, and then what you can do is grab one of the 8 things it gives you, and then put in why should I care about this? And then it'll give me 6 more things as to why that trend's important.
That's great.
So my friends, we live in a wild era right now where, for any of you who are like, I'm not sure how to add value, you have no excuses now with Chat GPT. It is, and Chris, I don't know how much you've played around with it, but
not enough, obviously. I think it's great. I'll go.
It's so good. I mean, you could literally say, hey, industrial manufacturing around this trend in IoT, how do I pitch IoT services to Keurig coffee? Oh, coffee brewing company. It's bonkers, dude.
Wow.
Bonkers as a part. And then I can take that one first bullet. I can say, hey, can you help me to write a 500 character blog post based on this topic? It's crazy. So for any of you, if you're talking about value-based selling and you're like, Jake, I'm not sure I feel qualified or I know, I just gave you the cheat code, Chat GPT. It's
great.
so awesome. Oh, it's so good. Okay, so let's I'm not going to shift gears necessarily. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of consultative approach. Okay, how can value selling take the product or service out of the nice to have, or that's cool to like, hey, we need to do something? Because I think a lot of people focus on the things they think are valuable or features they think are cool. And, they hear things at the end of the call. Chris, you and I have been on the calls and we probably listen into hundreds of calls that end like this. Yeah, Chris, this is really cool. Oh yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, this is cool. Yeah, no, this is, yeah. Can you send me some information? And yeah, no, definitely, man. I'll circulate that. And then, yeah, next week's bad. We've got our offsite. Just follow up with me in like, a week and a half. Right. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you out there, like, how did Jake know? Like, I've done this
last week.
I've done this a few times. And so we've got a question here too. So before, actually, I'm gonna take this question. Karam, let me know if I got that right, Karam. Hopefully I did get it right. He had a great question here from LinkedIn. So guys, I love this. Keep them coming. And I think it does tie into this perfectly, which is like, how do you take it out of this would like to have and to really need for this? He said, how do you sell value where you feel like the market is price driven? Where so many people are like, wow, we don't have budget. They didn't want to hear it, right? They're like, I don't even care what it is. I don't have budget for it. Like, how do you think value selling applies in this? And I would say, Karam, too, like, people are still spending a lot of money. So, somebody telling me they don't have $50,000 is a very polite middle finger. So, how do you think about value selling in these types of conditions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it is funny. I think your statement is a true one, and the fact that, like you said, they're spending money somewhere, right? And so if you find yourself competing in a scenario where, it's predominantly price driven, that is a super tough space to be, right? I guess my recommendation and kind of what we look at, because we have examples of that in our space as well, but it's find where you can differentiate. And if that means moving up the stack or outside of the stack, left or right, being creative around value that you can bring that is outside of kind of, let's call it a commodity scenario, right? Which usually is if price is the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or perceived commoditization. Oh,
that's
they're
right.
Similar, as a part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's an opportunity for creativity. And if you find yourself in a scenario where there's no ability to be creative, you can't get outside of that box at all. Well, you have to question kind of what's the value for you to stay there, right? And it's an opportunity to try to figure out if there's again an ancillary spot on the side of the kind of the supply chain or the vertical or the value chain, or on top or bottom of it. Would be what if I had a sales rep coming to me and saying that's what I would encourage them to go do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think for a lot of you out there who might be like, but Jake, we do get that. I would argue that probably the reason you're getting there is the value that you're talking about may not be easy enough to extrapolate. Like that the value is like, it's more like time savings. I can tell you right now in Chris, you sell part of your products, right? It can have that the time saving value prop right now is not the best, if possible, because it's more difficult to really kind of like tie back to that. And so, how do you turn that into, maybe if I have a time saving product, how do I use value selling then to amplify that? So, hey, maybe I feel like I have a commodity sale. How do I use a consultative or, value-based approach, Chris, to take that to that, like, hey, we need to do something, category?
I think one of the challenging parts around, I mean, yeah, on the one hand, like I said earlier, it sounds a little trite or hackneyed to talk about selling value, but the reality is those who do it really well, have figured out some of the above the line stuff, right? The below the line cost savings and productivity improvements, they're valuable, right? If you can show demonstrable value there, that's kind of easy money in my book. But the big money is on the top above the line, right?
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity to drive a revenue stream that maybe you've never considered. I know when I was at Microsoft, I had literally hundreds of kind of high level 1 hour executive briefing, right? I had 1 hour with a customer that in most cases I'd never met. And I would come in and I would basically tell 5 or 6 stories about that topic, revenue opportunities that they maybe hadn't considered specifically in the IoT space, but there's other applications.
Yeah.
And I can't remember a single one where we didn't leave that room with the group ideating amongst themselves, wanting to have a scheduled follow-up in the very short term to figure out what are some next steps that we can take to really unpack that value attribution. So I think that is extremely compelling for customers, and also extremely difficult for them to find that path. So to the extent that you can help them navigate that path, you're literally money for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just, do you know, and just think through it. I always just encourage people, if you think your product's very price driven, it's like, go deeper. Okay, well, you do this thing, but what are the problems they're having? And how could you tie it to those problems? I think sometimes we get caught up, in this product idea. Well, the product does this. It's like, take a step back. You actually, what you do is help people to increase employee retention by 5%, which leads to X contribution to the top line. You don't sell job postings. Right. And I think sometimes salespeople struggle to really understand the value for their customer and then how to tie what they do to what's valuable today.
Yeah.
So let's talk about research when it comes to value-based selling. So I talked about GPT as your kind of cheat sheet. How important is research? When you think about value-based selling and having those conversations?
I think it's critical, absolutely critical. We have teams right now, kind of along our transformational journey for our field at Wind River. We have a sales, interesting time. We have a sales kickoff coming up in a couple of weeks. And as preparation for that, the entire field force is running through a significant prep for one of their customers. And they're going through and reading, of course, all the public information. They're doing the if they can find private information, we subscribe to some analyst capabilities, right? And so they're going to come into that sales kickoff with a very sophisticated amount of research for one account, all attributing to a value around our product set, our solution set. But again, we have traditionally in our world been very used to speaking to kind of chief engineering level and groups that are kind of speccing out a real-time operating system for a product. And we're working to uplift, well, hey, instead of talking to a chief engineer, what about a chief innovation officer who's really tasked with uncovering new ways to drive revenue, uncovering new ways to please their customers, build their customer base, improve goodwill, all of those things. Let's up-level our thinking and our research to say, what assets do we have? What examples do we have that attribute to that person's, value questions? And especially for a team that, hasn't asked that question of themselves very often or ever in the past, that's a learning curve, right? And so we're asking them to do it, and then we're going to bring the team to our sales kickoff, and then we're going to go through those plans. We're going to provide coaching. We're going to have moderators, and we're going, it's a process, Jake. It's nobody wakes up knowing how to do this really, really well, but I can't emphasize enough the power of sitting down with someone in the C-suite or someone, over a business unit and being able to say, hey, I've done the research. I am pretty sure that these 5 things are what you're trying to drive. And we believe that we have value attribution across 4 of them along these lines. Tell me if I'm right and where I'm wrong. And that engagement at that point, now you've got a business leader leaning in, providing you feedback, helping you redline your proposal and your commentary. then you come back in a few weeks later and it hits right in the bullseye and it's super, super compelling. You can't do that without spending the time up front.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think, again, I feel like research to some extent is kind of like a lost art. It's like, I actually feel like people are coming into a lot of these meetings like less prepared.
Oh, I agree.
And again, there's just really no excuse. And again, we going back in time here, I guess in my second or third job, like they called it earn the right that, you did your prep and it was 10 minutes of prep for every, new first meeting, relevant competitors I want to reference and their use cases. Other things that I thought would be an industry trend or something I would bring up. So when I started the meeting, I'm like, hey, Chris, I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Never thank people for the time. That's my whole pet peeve. Looking forward to it. Hey, we're doing some work with, these two other organizations that, look, are really focused on the business process automation space. And, so this is an area, a space that we know really well, especially around like HR and the types of roles, et cetera. But first, each customer I work with is, different. So I want to understand the new. So it's like just setting the table with like that preparedness of like, I get it. I know what your business does. That's the very first question I used to ask my reps when they came to me. How do they make money? Can't tell me how they make money. How can you help their organization?
Yeah.
That's something I would just like, grind into them. It's like, how do they make money? How do they make money? How do they make money? As a part of this. So, all right, we've got a couple of questions here. The answer is either you're talking to the wrong person, you've not established a prospect party, but if you don't do this, you'll have lots of sales objects. Yeah, sometimes it's about talking to the wrong person. I have a mantra, Chris. I always assume that my first meeting is with the wrong person. I always assume that because here's the thing. I know other people need to get involved. I know that there's the magic champion is going to shepherd me through the whole deal. And I'm not going to have to do the work and understand value for these individual groups because that champion doesn't have time to do it. Right. So I think, Dennis, to your point here, it's like, it could be the wrong person or, you're just not doing a good enough job of, giving value to why other people. So last couple questions here, Chris, before we kind of wrap up. How do you give value? There's obviously on the calls, like what does value look like? We've talked a lot about the prep, about understanding what they're going through, economic conditions, how that changes. When you think about like off of calls or offline, like Muhammad here asks, like, would you suggest reaching out on LinkedIn or, other types of things? What are some ways that your teams have successfully, added value, not just when they're on the call, maybe, but off calls?
Yeah. Well, it's a multi-part question for sure, but I would say, we have done, back to your research question, we've been fairly successful when we've taken an industry. We're very industry aimed and focused at our company. And we'll look at value attribution that we've been able to make for a specific customer, and we'll compartmentalize that, and use it as an example as we reach out to additional customers and say, hey, this is what we were able to do in a scenario that we think is probably one that you're also experiencing. This kind of value attribution, would you be interested in having a conversation? And by the way, the vast majority of these customers we have, in some cases, decade-long relationships with, but we haven't necessarily, gone up and made sure we're talking to the next level and to someone who cares about this new kind of innovation and ability and value attribution that we can provide. So it's really helping teach the customer that, hey, we're not the same company you've been doing business with as a vendor for the last 15 years. We have also transformed, and we think we can actually play a big role in helping you transform. So kind of customer education is a big one. And the other I would just say is, the things that are slightly more intangible, and that is, again, a little trite, but it's making sure you're picking up the call when they dial you, right? It's making sure that you're being super responsible. It's making sure that you are helping, or that you're navigating their organization in a way that, for the most part, they want you to do. In some cases, you got to go around people, but these are all examples. The last one I would just say is, remember at the end of the day, it is pretty simple, right? It's cost saving and monetization opportunities, new revenue, right? Top and bottom line. But you do yourself a favor to really challenge yourself to think about, well, how can I be creative here? Like your point around employee retention, right? Those kinds of things. If you can abstract a couple of layers away, it's something that's super compelling for your customer, but also really attributes to value or revenue increase or cost decrease. I think that's the path to success.
Yeah. And I would say, that's where I think some of these like LinkedIn tactics can help as well too. Like if your CEO is active on LinkedIn and talking about the industry, those types of things, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that is the way we're moving. We want to hear from our peers. We want to hear from people who get it. And, imagine you're working on a deal and you're like, oh, hey, my CEO posted this or you did this. And it's like, it's relevant. And I feel like, so many people are looking for social proof. Jeff Gittimer, I'd interviewed him maybe a year and a half ago, and he said, nobody wants to talk to a nobody. And so I think that, in order for you to be more trusted as a seller, et cetera, this ability, even if you're not a content creator, you can be a curator for your customers. For sure. And you're adding that. I remember I had a really big deal. It was a 7-figure deal I closed. And this is really the project we were working with on was actually a logistics or a throughput project. And any of you out there, if you went to business school or, like business books, there's a book called The Goal, which is this like very classic fictional logistics book. But it helps you to understand throughput through this fictional. I sent everyone on their team a copy of The Goal. And it went over, quite well as a part of it too. So, for anyone out there, it's just like, what are those different little moments? And I think in a digital selling world in particular, Chris, creating those little moments is just more critical than ever. Those little value add points, little value add here, little value add there, I just see as being, critical as we move forward. So
great examples.
Chris, appreciate you, man. I wish we could talk about this for forever. Last thought. What's the one thing you want to leave people with whenever it comes to value selling?
Yeah. And thanks, Jake. This has been super fun. I love this, and we could talk about it for a lot more time.
Easy.
But
yeah.
Last thought would be, don't settle for kind of the easy way out. Make sure you do your homework. Make sure you think about both sides of the line, top and bottom, and make sure you stay super, super personalized. Because again, the old adage that people do business for no matter what, people do business with people they like and that they believe really understand them, and who understands what they're in it for and how to help them.
I just to click on that. That's why people will like you. They will like you because you're someone who adds value, not because you're this like affable, likable person. Sure. That's one part of it. But people today, they don't got time for that. They don't need more friends necessarily. They want people who make them smarter. And that's where I think the opportunity is for a lot of people, is just make someone smarter. That's what they want to do. So anyway, this has been awesome, man. Thank you everyone for joining. We will see you next week, same time. And Chris, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Great day. Cheers.
Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.